The afternoon of January 7th, 1970 began like any other winter day in Imjärvi, a small community located 15 kilometres northwest of Heinola in southern Finland. The temperature had dropped to minus 17 degrees Celsius, typical for a Finnish winter, and the sky was clear with a few stars already visible as sunset approached. Two local men, 36-year-old woodman Anu Heinonen and 38-year-old farmer Esko Viljo, both experienced competition skiers, had decided to spend the afternoon skiing through the familiar forest trails near their homes. At 4:45 p.m, the two friends descended from a small hill and came to a stop in a glade where they would usually rest during their skiing excursions. They had been standing there for approximately 5 minutes, catching their breath in the windless air, when they heard a buzzing sound coming from somewhere above them. Looking up, they spotted an intensely bright light moving across the sky. The light approached from the north, made a wide sweeping turn, and then came directly toward them from the south, descending as it moved closer. As the buzzing sound grew louder, the men remained motionless, staring upward without speaking. The light continued its descent until it was hovering about 15 metres above them. They could now see that a luminous red-grey mist was swirling around the light source. Puffs of smoke appeared to be thrown up from the top of this strange cloud formation. The cloud descended further, and as it reached a height of about 15 metres, they could finally see what was inside it: a round metallic object with a flat bottom approximately 3 metres in diameter. According to Arno's account, given to Geekhoff, the Gothenburg UFO Information Centre, the craft hovered completely motionless while the buzzing sound continued at a low volume. Then the disc began to descend, along with the red-grey fog, which became thinner and more transparent as it moved downward. The object stopped at a height of 3 to 4 metres, so close that Arno later recalled he could have touched it with his ski pole if he had reached upward. The craft was completely round with a dome on its upper side. Along the lower edge was a raised section containing 3 spheres or domes spaced at equal distances from each other. From the centre of the bottom, a tube projected downward, approximately 25 centimetres in diameter. Without warning, an intense beam of light shot out from this tube. The two men watched in amazement as the light moved a couple of times before stopping to illuminate a circular patch of snow about 1 metre in diameter. Around this brightly lit area was a dark edge, almost coal black, and about 1 centimetre wide. What happened next would change both men's lives forever. Arno, who had been standing completely still, suddenly felt as if someone had grabbed him around the waist from behind and pulled him backward. He believed he took a step back, and in that same instant he saw the creature. Standing in the middle of the light beam was a being approximately 90 centimetres or just under 3 feet tall, holding a black box in its hands. From a round opening in the box came a yellow, pulsating light. The creature had extremely thin arms and legs. Its face was pale, almost wax-like in appearance. While Arno didn't notice the eyes clearly, he was struck by the nose, which he described as more of a hook than a proper nose. The ears were very small and seemed to narrow toward the head. The being wore what appeared to be a light green overall. On its feet were boots of a darker green colour that extended above the knees. White gauntlets covered its hands up to the elbows, and its fingers were bent like claws around the black box it was holding. Esko's description matched his friend's in most details. He noted that the creature stood in the middle of the bright light and appeared luminous, like phosphorus, though its face remained very pale. He observed the thin, slanting shoulders and childlike arms. On the being's head was a conical helmet that shone like metal. He confirmed the creature was less than 1 metre tall. Suddenly, the being turned and directed the opening of the box toward Arno. The pulsating yellow light became extremely bright, almost blinding. Then a red-grey mist began flowing down from the hovering object, and large sparks started flying from the illuminated circle of snow. These sparks, which Arno described as being about 10 centimetres long and coloured red, green and violet, floated outward in long curves. Many of them struck Arno, but despite his expectation that they would burn, he felt nothing at all. Esko found the multicoloured sparks beautiful, but as he watched, the red mist became increasingly thick until it completely obscured the creature. The fog became so dense that neither man could see the other, despite standing only a few metres apart. According to Esko, he had observed the being for perhaps 15 to 20 seconds before it disappeared in the thickening mist. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the encounter ended. The light beam appeared to melt away, flying upward like a flickering flame, before being sucked back into the opening in the craft. The fog seemed to tear apart like a curtain, and the air above them was empty. The entire encounter had lasted only minutes. The two men remained in the glade for about 3 more minutes, talking and even laughing nervously about what they had just witnessed. However, Arno began to notice a troubling numbness in his right side, the side that had been closest to the light beam. When he tried to move forward on his skis, his right leg wouldn't support his weight and he fell into the snow. The entire leg had become stiff and aching, with his foot feeling completely anaesthetised. As darkness fell, Esko realised his friend was in serious trouble. Despite repeated attempts, Arno couldn't stand up. Esko had no choice but to half carry, half drag his companion the 3 kilometres back to Arno's home. When they arrived and knocked on the door, something they didn't usually do, Arno's mother was shocked by their appearance. Arno was leaning heavily on Esko for support, and Esko's face appeared red and swollen. Once inside, Arno's condition worsened. He experienced severe back pain, aching joints, and a terrible headache. He soon began vomiting. Most disturbing of all, when he urinated, the urine was nearly black. He described it as looking like black coffee poured onto the snow. This alarming symptom would continue for several months. Esko hurried to the nearest neighbour with a telephone 600 metres away. After 2 doctors declined to come, Dr. Pauli Kajanoja agreed to meet them at the Heinola clinic within an hour. The neighbour drove them there. Dr. Kajanoja found both men in a state of shock. They talked quickly and incoherently, seeming absent-minded. While the doctor could find nothing clinically wrong with Arno, he prescribed sleeping pills and the next day sedatives, assuring him the symptoms would disappear within 10 days. However, the symptoms persisted for months. By May 1970, Arno reported he was still suffering from pains in his head and neck. The slightest effort exhausted him. While the numbness in his right leg had subsided, he continued to have balance problems. His memory had deteriorated so badly that whenever he left home, he had to tell someone where he was going in case he needed to be retrieved. Visits to the site of the encounter made him feel worse, and Esko reported that several other people who had visited the location had felt sick for days afterward. Esko also suffered lasting effects, including persistent headaches and eye problems. Dr. Kajanoja later reflected that the symptoms Arno described were similar to those experienced after exposure to radioactivity. He regretted not having instruments to measure radiation levels and found the black urine particularly puzzling. While it might have contained blood, this couldn't explain why the symptom persisted for months. The incident wasn't without corroboration. On the same day at the same time, 2 other people reported seeing a bright light in the sky. Elna Sitari, a farmer's wife in Imjärvi, about 15 kilometres from Imjärvi, was heading to her cowhouse when she saw a strange light in the direction of Imjärvi. In Poso, 10 kilometres north of Imjärvi, a young man collecting firewood observed a similar light phenomenon at exactly 4:45 p.m. The scientific community showed interest in the case. Professor Matt Turi, an electrophysics expert at Helsinki University, suggested the injuries might have been caused by electrical radiation. He noted that since the witnesses described the light as blinding and white, it couldn't have been ultraviolet radiation, which appears bluish. If radiation had penetrated Arno's clothing, it would have to have been short-wave radiation, like X-rays, an overdose of which could cause the reported symptoms. The Institute for High Voltage Research at Uppsala University examined the case but concluded the phenomenon wasn't related to any known form of atmospheric electricity. Soil, vegetation and snow samples from the site were analysed at Chalmers Institute of Technology for radiation, but showed only normal background levels. In June 1970, when the 2 witnesses returned to the site with a Swedish journalist, photographer and interpreter, another strange event occurred. The hands of the 3 visitors suddenly turned red and Arno had to leave the area due to a severe headache. The story took an unexpected turn in the years following the initial encounter. Between January 1970 and August 1972, Arno claimed to have had 23 additional UFO sightings. More remarkably, he reported becoming a contactee. On 2 occasions, after hearing a loud female voice directing him to secluded meeting places, he encountered what he described as an extremely beautiful spacewoman. During the first meeting, the woman appeared wearing a yellow trouser suit that rustled when she moved. She stood 1.5 metres, or just under 5 feet tall, and had shoulder-length hair and blue eyes. Arno noted she didn't walk like a human, but seemed to float or hover. Despite appearing to be about 20 years old, she claimed to be 180. She held a silvery ball with 3 antennae pointing at Arno. Speaking Finnish, she greeted him with "Hyvä päivä" and told him she came from a green and pleasant land. She explained that 3 different species of humanoids had visited Imjärvi, some smaller than her at 140 centimetres, some her height, and some about 2 metres tall. She also stated that the January encounter had actually lasted 3 minutes, not the few seconds the witnesses had perceived. During their second meeting, when Arno asked again about her origin, she told him to hurry home where he would see her craft. Indeed, upon arriving home, he observed an object 5 to 7 metres in diameter in the sky. Both Arno and Esko reported another bizarre incident at Esko's home, where a being slightly taller than 1.5 metres, or about 5 feet, wearing a grey suit with white stripes, suddenly stepped out of a wall and stood in the middle of the floor for 30 seconds before vanishing. These later claims raised questions about the credibility of the original encounter. Swedish ufologist Anders Liljegren pointed out the troubling lack of physical evidence. Arno claimed to have received a green pen from the space beings, but lent it to a researcher and never saw it again. He was given a stone, but was made to throw it away. When he attempted to photograph the spacewoman, both she and his camera disappeared. Esko tried to photograph a mysterious light, but the camera was knocked from his hand and the film burned to ashes. Interestingly, this wasn't Arno's first reported UFO sighting. He had experienced one 6 years earlier. Additionally, in February 1969, nearly a year before the Imjärvi encounter, 16-year-old Matti Kontilainen had a frightening experience just 100 metres from where Arno and Esko would later have their encounter. While skiing home through the forest around 11 p.m. on a cloudy evening, Kontilainen saw the forest suddenly illuminated by an intense light that rushed just above the treetops at such low altitude that he threw himself into the snow. He described it as resembling a huge welding flame that disappeared instantly, travelling from south to north without making any sound. Despite the controversy surrounding the later claims, local residents who knew the witnesses vouched for their character. Matti Hapanimi, a 46-year-old farmer and member of the Heinola Rural District Council, whose farm was only 1 kilometre from Arno's home, stated that while many people in the neighbourhood had laughed at the story, he didn't think it was a joking matter. Having known both men since they were boys, he described them as quiet, rational individuals who didn't drink alcohol, and he believed their account was true. The Imjärvi encounter remains one of Finland's most documented UFO cases, notable for its physical effects on the witnesses, multiple forms of corroborating testimony, and the strange developments that followed. Whether the initial encounter was a genuine contact with non-human entities, an unusual natural phenomenon, or something else entirely, it left a powerful mark on the lives of two Finnish skiers on that cold January afternoon in 1970.